Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're tackling something genuinely fascinating: visual theology. We're going to look closely at how these incredibly complex, centuries-old religious debates get distilled down into highly shareable bite-sized graphics. Now, I want to be perfectly clear right out of the gate. Our goal here isn't to take sides, endorse a specific religious viewpoint, or declare a winner. Nope, instead, we're putting on our analytical hats. We're going to examine a specific comparative graphic to understand exactly how it constructs its argument through the strategic use of design and text. Okay, let's dive into this. How do you take a massive, sprawling theological debate and visually map it out so that anyone scrolling on their phone can instantly grasp the argument? Well, the secret sauce is juxtaposition. By placing contrasting ideas right next to each other, a creator can guide your brain to a very specific conclusion without writing a single paragraph of explanation. It's a brilliant communication strategy, honestly. And to understand exactly how it works, we really need to look at a prime example. So here is our primary source material for today. It's an Arabic graphic structured as a really simple 6-row grid, and it's divided straight down the middle into 2 distinct columns. If you look closely at the layout, it is highly intentional. The entire right-hand column is dedicated to attributes of Jesus, or Yasu in Arabic. Then, the left-hand column is totally dedicated to attributes of God, or Allah. Each row presents a direct, side-by-side contrast between the 2 figures. You know what's really interesting about this methodology, though? It's how the author builds their case. They aren't just throwing out unsupported claims. No way! Every single box in this graphic contains a specific citation, and every single citation comes from the exact same source material, the Bible. By using text from the Christian scriptures to build this distinct dichotomy between Jesus and God, the author is actually using the source material of one faith to construct an argument that challenges its traditional theological framework. It's literally an incredibly effective rhetorical device. Let's break this argument down layer by layer. Section 1. Mortality and physical limits. So let's focus on that top green row of the chart. The text gives us a stark, neutral translation of a core theological difference. On the right, the graphic asserts that Jesus died. Directly across from it, on the left, it states with a big check mark that God does not die. The visual weight here is undeniable, right? It sets up this immediate contrast between mortality and immortality, grounding the whole theological debate in a very tangible, physical reality. And to support this first point of contrast, the graphic points directly to scriptural evidence. For the claim about Jesus, it cites 1 Corinthians 15:3, a New Testament verse discussing the death of Christ. To support the claim of God's immortality, it brings in 1 Timothy 1:17, which praises the eternal, immortal King. By placing these specific addresses literally side by side, the creator is inviting the viewer to look up the texts and see the contrast for themselves. Moving down to the second green row in the chart, we can see how this builds on that initial premise. Here, the graphic uses the concept of sleep to further underline the theme of physical limits. On the right, it states, Jesus slept. On the left, it counters with, God does not slumber nor sleep. Again, we're seeing this deliberate highlighting of human physical necessity, the sheer need for rest, contrasted against divine boundlessness. Now, the scriptural addresses provided for this argument are super specific. For Jesus sleeping, the chart points to Matthew 8:24, which is a narrative account of Jesus sleeping in a boat during a huge storm. For God, it reaches back into the Old Testament, citing Psalm 121:4, which explicitly states that the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Keeping our tone strictly analytical here, you can really see how methodically the author is layering these citations to emphasize physical constraints. Moving right along to Section 2, Temptation and Visibility, where things shift to the internal struggle. Looking at the top red row of the image, we see this striking contrast regarding temptation. On the right, the Arabic text notes that Jesus was tempted. On the left, it clearly states God is not tempted. This shifts the argument from the physical body to the nature of the mind and spirit. It contrasts a figure who faces human-like trials with a deity who is fundamentally immune to them. And this brilliantly illustrates the creator's strategy of pairing 2 very specific New Testament verses to make their case. They use Hebrews 4:15, which discusses Jesus being tempted in every way, and juxtapose it directly with James 1:13, which states unequivocally that God cannot be tempted by evil. It's a side-by-side comparison that essentially forces the reader to reconcile 2 completely distinct descriptions of spiritual vulnerability. Now, the blue row shifts the focus slightly, but it still maintains that theme of human accessibility. Translated, the right side points out the physical visibility of the historical figure, saying people saw Jesus. The left side counters this with the absolute invisibility of the divine. No one has ever seen God. It's a profound contrast of the historical, intangible, right, against the transcendent and unseen.
To establish this clear visual dichotomy, the graphic relies heavily on the writings attributed to John. It cites John 1:29 for people seeing Jesus and 1 John 4:12 for the assertion that no one has ever seen God. Notice how using verses from the very same biblical author makes the visual contrast feel even sharper and much more deliberate to the reader. Honestly, it's a remarkable analytical choice that adds incredible weight to the juxtaposition.
We arrive at Section 3, Humanity versus Omnipotence. Let's analyze the orange row. Translating it impartially, the argument here really distinguishes the core nature of the subjects. On the right, it claims Jesus was and will remain a man. On the left, it offers the direct counterstatement, God is not a man. This is a straightforward, literal juxtaposition regarding humanity versus non-human divine nature. The verses the graphic uses as evidence for this specific juxtaposition actually span right across the Bible. It brings in John 8:40, where Jesus speaks of himself as a man who has told the truth, and sets it right against Numbers 23:19, a well-known Old Testament verse stating that God is not a human being. Finally, we look at the bottom red row, which tackles the ultimate question of limitless power. The right column states, Jesus is not omnipotent, meaning not all-powerful. The left column finishes the chart's entire argument with the uncompromising assertion, God is omnipotent. To supply the final pair of biblical citations for this claim of differing omnipotence, the Creator uses John 5:19, where Jesus states the Son can do nothing by himself, and contrasts it with the sweeping declarations of absolute sovereign power found over in Isaiah 45:5-7. So the crucial point is, how does this all work together? Let's look at Section 4, Synthesizing the Chart's Message, to view the visual argument in its entirety. Looking at this complete translated dataset, you really start to realize how the creator stacked these 6 specific themes: mortality, sleep, temptation, visibility, humanity, and power. By placing the right column, representing physical and human limits, directly against the left column, representing unbounded divine attributes, the creator builds one overarching systematic theological case using absolutely nothing but carefully curated citations. As we wrap up, I really want to remind you why understanding visuals like this matters so much. When you isolate specific texts and place them in a highly structured, contrasting format like this, you actively guide a reader's conclusion. It totally bypasses long-winded debate and appeals directly to our brain's natural love for pattern and contrast. It's like a visual puzzle that practically solves itself in the viewer's mind. Which leaves us with a fascinating thought to ponder. As you scroll through your feeds today, pay close attention to how information is framed. How does isolating and comparing specific snippets of text, whether they're religious, political, or historical, shape our understanding of incredibly complex arguments? Visual design is never just about looking good. It's about making an argument. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking great questions, and I'll see you next time.